Welcome to a car that I've wanted to do a video with for a very long time. This is the brutal, brilliant AMG GT R.
The GTR currently sits at the top of the AMG tree. It houses all of the latest tech, including a titanium exhaust, rear-wheel steering and a 9-stage traction control system. Its roof and front wings are made from carbon fibre, and yes, it has a name that annoys some Nissan owners.
We're at Castle Combe, one of those very distinctive perimeter airfield tracks in the UK. I think it actually really suits this car. All the aerodynamics can actually get to work here. A bit of room to play. You can feel the rear wheel steering through this chicane here. I just adore this car. I love the fact that in this car as well you've got real bounce. You might think it's a proper hooligan because that's what AMGs are sort of known for, I suppose, but you can balance this car so well on the exit of corners. AMG's also improved its gearboxes no end. There was a time when it was really quite sort of restrictive and you felt like they could never really keep up with the power that was coming out, but this is absolutely instant now in the way it changes gear. Hugely stable under braking. The rear wheel steer that this has helps it into corners but also gives it stability through this tricky tight chicane, bouncing through there. So it spent a lot of time being developed on the Nürburgring, hence all the green hell references in this paint. And I've got this in the middle of the damper settings because I think it copes with the bumps around this circuit slightly better that way. If we turn the dampers up to their firmest, you'll see that yes, it gets a bit more instant, but it also gets just a bit spikier, a bit choppier, perhaps on some of the really smooth European circuits you might want it, but I think it's best in its middle setting. I love this thing.
It is a phenomenal car, and the harder you push it, the better it seems to get. It's a big step on from the original AMG GT.
I've been trying to think, what should we compare this to? The obvious thing is probably a Porsche 911 GT3 RS, perhaps a BMW M4 GTS. And I thought, there are probably going to be quite a few of you watching this thinking, oh, I would love one of those, but I need to carry more than one passenger, or just need more luggage space, otherwise my vintage scale electric set won't fit. So I thought, why don't we compare it to this?
I give you the E63 S. It might look like a very different car to the GTR. Indeed, it is a very different car to the GTR. But under the bonnet is essentially the same 4-litre V8 engine with 2 turbochargers stowed in the V. So, the question is, just how much supercar is there in this big saloon? First test, sound.
Surely that big saloon can't compete with this in its titanium silencer. Well, this particular car has been fitted with the AMG Performance exhaust. And as you can hear, it sounds very good. AMG really are to be congratulated on this engine because of all the new breed of turbocharged engines, this, hands down, sounds the best. Doesn't matter if you're in a GTR or this E-Class. What a noise! They arguably had so much to live up to with those wonderful naturally aspirated V8s, but this is just brilliant. If we're being super critical, then what you don't get in this is the sort of the all-encompassing sound that when you get into the GTR and start it up, it feels, well, it just feels like it's a part of you. But nonetheless, for a big saloon, it's quite an echo chamber for that V8.
Next up, looks.
Alright then, it's not really a contest, is it? I mean, some wider rear arches on that might help, and yes, that is a £7,500 paint option called Green Hell Magno, just in case you're wondering, but that definitely looks better.
It seems almost unfair to have a drag race, but while we're here...
I haven't checked the specs, but surely the sports car is going to win the drag race. I must have this. I got completely destroyed there. The four-wheel drive just... I was in race start. Perhaps I need to warm the tyres a bit. But even so, I'm not sure I've beaten that. Perhaps I should have checked the specs.
Of course, if I'd checked the stats beforehand, I'd have seen that Mercedes' own figures actually placed the E63 S ahead of the GTR in a drag race to 62 miles an hour, with the E's 3.4 seconds besting the GTR's 3.6 seconds. What's more, it seems that the saloon's figures are much easier to achieve and repeat, thanks to one thing we haven't mentioned thus far: its four-wheel drive. There's no doubt which would be quicker around a lap, but the sports car shouldn't mess with the saloon at the traffic lights. While we're about it, let's do a quick top trumps comparison with a few other categories. Top speeds. In the green corner, we have 198 miles an hour, while in the white corner, we have an electronically limited 186 miles an hour. GTR wins. Power. Green has 577 brake horsepower, white has 604 brake horsepower. E63 S wins. Torque. Green's 516 pounds-foot plays white's 605 pounds-foot. E63 S wins again. Weight. Green tips the scales at 1630 kilos, while white weighs in at 1950 kilos. GTR wins. Both cars have the same optional ceramic composite brakes, with 6-piston calipers clamping 402mm discs up front, so that one's a draw. There are bucket seats in both cars, but not all bucket seats are born equal, and the GTR wins this one. We could keep going, but overall it's surprisingly even, although the saloon has one final trump card. This spec notwithstanding, it's at least £40,000 cheaper than the sports car. The final metric to compare is fun.
So that's the fun, sort of objective stuff, if you like, over what we want to know is, can the E63 actually get anywhere close to the GTR in terms of fun round a track? Well, in some ways, yes. It's hugely impressive, this big car. The main thing it's obviously got against it is the weight. It weighs over 300 kilos more, but mitigating against that, we've got carbon ceramic brakes as an option on this car. You can ratchet the suspension all the way up, so it feels really very, very tight and controlled, but in fact I think it feels nicer because you kind of almost want that big saloon feel. So I think knocking them back just to their middle setting is nice, just so you get a bit of roll. You can feel how the car is moving around in the corners. The gearbox is phenomenal. It's the 9-speed MCT as opposed to the dual clutch option that you've got in the GTR, but it's hugely impressive. And it's chuffing quick in a straight line still. You'd imagine turning up to a track day on one of these and people looking at you going, what on earth he bought that here for? You would have a whale of a time. We obviously need to talk about the fact that this is four-wheel drive as opposed to the GTR's rear-wheel drive, but really it makes sense. It certainly means you can still go wonderfully sideways with it. And even this has the drift mode, but to be honest, I don't think you really need it, because the four-wheel drive just gives you a little bit of nice extra kind of stability on the exit of corners. This is in four-wheel drive mode, so I really don't see the drift mode as anything other than a gimmick and sort of placating people that think, oh, four-wheel drive, no, boring, ugh. Must be able to decouple the front axle. No, you don't. Just great. What a silly but really fun car. No, it's not as nimble on the way into corners. That's obviously where you really, really do notice the difference between the two cars. But given this has got 2 extra seats and a massive boot, I love it.
The E63 S sits in a fine tradition of slightly bonkers super saloons. It's a relatively select club, but this car upholds the values of such things as the Lotus Carlton, E39 M5, and indeed the original Red Sow that started the AMG story. It is a truly wonderful thing.
Of course, given the choice between both cars, if I could have either of them and money was no object, then obviously I'm going to pick the GTR. I mean, it's just so exciting. It's a brilliant, brilliant car. But love the fact that AMG have done a big saloon that's got so much of this in its DNA. It's a little bit silly, but it's also a little bit brilliant.